The demon lord who destroyed half the continent woke up as a baby in the village he burned down. Same village, same bloodline, same people who lost everything because of him. His name was Valgor the Ash King. 1,200 years of conquest, 7 kingdoms crushed, a throne built on bones. He commanded armies of monsters that blotted out the sun when they marched. He burned forests into deserts, froze rivers into glaciers, turned cities into graveyards. The 4 heroes who finally killed him barely survived the fight. It took all 4 of them working together for 3 straight days to bring him down. And even as the final blade went through his chest, Valgor laughed. Not because he was insane, because he genuinely thought dying was funny. After 1,200 years, everything was funny. Then he opened his eyes and saw a wooden ceiling, and heard a woman humming a lullaby, and realized he couldn't move his arms because they were the size of sausages. Baby arms, tiny and useless, attached to a body that weighed less than his old helmet. Valgor, the Ash King, destroyer of nations, was an infant. He tried to scream, and what came out was a gurgle. The woman holding him smiled and whispered that her little Ren was so cute when he babbled. Ren. They named him Ren. He wanted to incinerate something, but his mana channels were the size of threads. So he just lay there, helpless, staring at the ceiling with ancient fury and baby eyes. It took him 3 months to figure out where he was. The village of Ashenvale, a farming community in the Greenreach Valley. The same valley he had personally torched during the Eastern Campaign 8 centuries ago. The same village that had been rebuilt 7 times since then, each time on the same spot. Because the soil was good and humans are stubborn like that. His new mother was a woman named Elise, kind face, calloused hands, terrible singing voice. His new father was a man named Bram, quiet, broad-shouldered, smelled like hay and iron. They were simple farmers who adored their firstborn son with the gray eyes and serious face. Gray eyes that had watched civilizations burn in another life. But they didn't know that. All they knew was that baby Ren was unusually quiet and stared at things too long. The village midwife said some babies were just like that. Old souls, she called them. She had absolutely no idea how right she was. For the first 3 years, Ren did nothing but observe and plan. His mana was recovering slowly, leaking back into his new body like water filling a cracked cup. By age 2 he could sense the mana flow of every living thing within 10 meters. By 3 he could internally circulate enough power to warm his own hands on cold nights. Pathetic by his old standards, but progress nonetheless. What surprised him was how much he noticed about the village while being small and ignored. Farmers who worked from dawn until their backs screamed. Children who played in the same dirt roads he'd once ordered armies to march through. Old women who hung herbs in their windows and gossiped about things that didn't matter. And his mother, who sang the same terrible lullaby every night without fail. In 1,200 years as the Demon Lord, Valgor had never paid attention to any of this. Humans were enemies, resources, obstacles, targets. Never just people living their lives. Watching them from a crib, unable to speak or move or destroy, forced to simply witness. Ren saw something the Ash King never bothered to look at. How hard ordinary life actually was. His father Bram came home with bleeding hands from clearing rocks in the North Field. Not because he was weak, because the soil was bad and the rocks kept coming back. His mother Elise stretched their food supply with the creativity born from constant shortage. The village had no healer, no defensive walls, no magical support of any kind. When wolves came too close, Bram and 3 other men stood guard with wooden spears. When winter hit hard, families shared blankets because nobody had enough on their own. This was the world the Demon Lord had spent 12 centuries trying to conquer. A world of people sharing blankets and standing guard with sticks. Ren felt something unfamiliar stir in his tiny chest. Not guilt exactly, guilt implies you think you were wrong. Something more like the uncomfortable realization that you never thought about it at all. By age 5, Ren could speak fluently and had memorized the village's entire layout. He also had enough mana to perform minor cantrips if he was very careful. The first spell he cast in his new body was a warming charm on his mother's hands. She had been kneading bread in the winter kitchen, fingers red and cracked from the cold. Ren placed his small hands over hers and pushed a thread of heat through his palms. Elise gasped and looked at her son with wide eyes. "Ren, your hands are so warm," she said, smiling. "Must be from sitting by the fire," he replied, which was a terrible lie she completely believed. That night, Bram told a neighbor that his boy might have a touch of magic. The neighbor laughed and said every parent thinks that. Bram laughed too, but he noticed that the bread Elise made that morning was unusually perfect, like the dough had been kneaded by hands that never got cold. Ren's first real test came at age 7. A pack of dire wolves, 6 of them, wandered too close to the village during a harsh winter. Bram and 4 other men went out with spears and torches. Ren followed because a 7-year-old with 12 centuries of battle experience isn't impatient. when the largest wolf broke through the torchline and lunged at his father's throat. Ren didn't think. He reacted. A pulse of force magic, invisible, silent, hit the wolf mid-leap. It flew sideways 20 feet and crashed into a snowbank. Bram thought the wind caught it. The other men thought the wolf slipped on ice. Ren stood behind a tree, heart pounding in a body that was still too small for what he knew. The wolves retreated, and nobody was hurt. Bram came home with a wolf tooth he'd knocked loose during the fight. He gave it to Ren as a trophy and called him his good luck charm. Ren held the tooth and felt something that Valgor the Ash King had never experienced. The desire to protect something instead of destroy it. It was deeply uncomfortable, and he hated it. But he kept the tooth. By age 10, Ren had secretly mastered 6 schools of magic in his new body. Fire, ice, force, wind, earth, and shadow. Each one a fraction of what he could do in his old body, but growing steadily. He practiced at night in the forest behind the village while everyone slept, using his old techniques adapted for a child's mana pool, precise and efficient. The Ash King's magic had been a blunt instrument, raw power over everything. Ren's magic was a scalpel, every drop of mana placed exactly where it needed to go. Necessity breathed precision, and a child's body demanded necessity. He also discovered something that changed his understanding of his own reincarnation. The village sat on a convergence of 3 ley lines. Underground rivers of natural mana that fed the entire valley's fertility. That's why the soil was so good, why the crops grew, why people kept rebuilding here. And it was also why Valgor had burned the valley 8 centuries ago. He'd been trying to disrupt the ley lines to weaken the human kingdom's magical infrastructure. He failed because ley lines can't be burned, they run too deep. But the village he destroyed was sitting on the very power source he'd been trying to reach. The irony made him laugh out loud in the forest, which scared an owl half to death. The ley line convergence was also the reason his reincarnation happened here specifically. His soul, carrying 12 centuries of accumulated power, needed a body near a mana source. And Ashenvale was the strongest natural mana point on the continent. The Ash King was reborn in the place he tried hardest to destroy, because it was the only place strong enough to hold what he was. At 12, Ren's quiet life shattered. Not because of monsters or armies, because of tax collectors. 3 men in clean uniforms arrived from the regional capital. They informed the village elder that taxes were being tripled effective immediately. The regional lord needed funding for his new manor. Triple taxes on a village that was already stretching every harvest to breaking point. The elder, a weathered old man named Garen, tried to negotiate. The lead collector backhanded him across the face and told him to pay or burn. Ren watched from the edge of the crowd and felt something ignite in his chest. Not the cold strategic fury of the Ash King. Something hotter, messier, more personal. The fury of a boy watching someone hit a man he respected. He didn't act, not yet, because 12 centuries of warfare had taught him that striking first without a plan is how you win a battle and lose a war. Instead, he went home and asked his father about the regional lord. Bram explained that Lord Vestin controlled 3 valleys and answered to the duke above him. The duke answered to the king, who was too far away to care about a farming village. Power flowed downhill, and the people at the bottom drowned in it. Ren listened and filed every detail into a mind that had once coordinated continental campaigns. The tax collectors returned a week later for the first payment. The village couldn't pay, obviously. The collectors seized 3 families' grain stores into livestock herds. Bram tried to stop them and took a boot to the ribs for his trouble. Elise ran to help him, and the lead collector shoved her to the ground. Ren watched his mother fall, and something inside him went very, very still. The kind of still that comes before an avalanche. That night, Ren left the village and walked 12 miles to Lord Vestin's manor. Alone, in the dark, at age 12, with the mind of a demon lord and the body of a farm boy. The manor was well guarded, stone walls, iron gate, 20 armed men on patrol. For a normal 12-year-old, this would be impossible. For the Ash King, this was barely an inconvenience. Ren didn't kill anyone. He walked through the walls using shadow magic, completely unseen. He entered Lord Vestin's private office and sat in the lord's own chair. When Vestin came in for his midnight brandy, he found a gray-eyed boy sitting at his desk, smiling the kind of smile that made 12 centuries of conquered kings nervous. Before Vestin could scream for guards, Ren raised one finger. Every candle in the room turned blue, and the temperature dropped 30 degrees. The brandy in Vestin's hand froze solid. Ren told Lord Vestin 3 things. First, the taxes on Ashenvale returned to their previous rate immediately. Second, the seized grain and livestock are returned by morning. Third, if Lord Vestin or anyone representing him harms another villager, Ren will come back, and this time he won't bother with the chair. Vestin wet himself. which Ren found deeply satisfying in a way the Ash King would have considered beneath him. The grain and livestock were returned before dawn. Nobody in the village knew how or why. They just thanked the gods and moved on. Ren went home, crawled into bed, and slept like a baby. Because he was one, technically. The incident with Vestin taught Ren something important about his new life. Power was still necessary, but the way he used it had to change. The Ash King solved problems by removing everyone involved. Ren solved the tax problem by scaring one man in a chair. Same result, no corpses, no armies, no continental devastation. Efficiency, the Ash King would have called it, if he'd ever bothered trying. But the truth was simpler and more uncomfortable than efficiency. Ren didn't want to kill people anymore. Not because killing was hard, it was embarrassingly easy with his power. Because his mother sang terrible lullabies and his father gave him wolf teeth. And the old women hung herbs in their windows and the children played in the dirt. And none of them deserved what the Ash King would have done to solve their problems. The next 3 years were the most productive of Ren's two lives combined. Not in terms of conquest or destruction. In terms of building. He used earth magic to reinforce the village's foundations without anyone noticing. Walls that looked like ordinary stone but could withstand a siege weapon's impact. He improved the irrigation system by redirecting underground water flow with subtle spells. Crop yields doubled and the farmers thought they'd just had a good season. He carved defensive runes into the boundary stones around the village perimeter. Any hostile creature crossing those stones would feel an overwhelming urge to turn around. The wolf attack stopped completely, and everyone credited the new scarecrows Bram had put up. The scarecrows were made of straw and had no magical properties whatsoever. Ren let his father take the credit because Bram's smile was worth more than recognition. He also started a small herb garden behind the house, using his knowledge of alchemy from his demon lord days to grow medicinal plants. Feverfew for colds, bone set for fractures, silverleaf for infections. When the village children got sick, Ren's teas always seemed to work better than anything else. Elise told the neighbors her son had a gift for plants. She had no idea the gift came with 12 centuries of biological warfare knowledge. But the teas healed instead of harmed, and that was the point. Same knowledge, different intent, completely different result. At 15, Ren's peaceful construction project hit its first serious obstacle. A dungeon appeared. Not naturally. Dungeons formed from concentrated mana over centuries. This one erupted overnight, which meant something had forced it open. The entrance yawned like a wound in the hillside to miles east of the village. Dark energy pulsed from inside, the kind that attracted monsters from miles around. Within a day, creatures started gathering near the entrance. Goblins, shadowhounds, a troll that had wandered down from the mountains. The village had no adventurers, no combat mages, no defense beyond farming tools and courage. Ren assessed the situation the way the Ash King would have. Dungeon core destabilized, probably by the ley line convergence beneath the village. Monster accumulation rate suggests 3 days before the population reaches critical mass. At critical mass, they'll overflow toward the nearest settlement, which was Ashenvale, which was his home. Ren told his parents he was going camping with friends. He didn't have friends and his parents knew that, but they let him go because he was 15. And 15-year-olds do things that don't make sense. He reached the dungeon entrance at dusk and counted the gathered monsters. 47 goblins, 12 shadowhounds, 1 troll, and something deeper he couldn't identify. For the Ash King, this would have been a warm-up before breakfast. For Ren, in a 15-year-old body with maybe 5% of his former power, it was going to be interesting. He started with the goblins because goblins are stupid and predictable. A controlled burst of force magic scattered the first group into the trees. Then he used shadow magic to create the illusion of a much larger predator approaching. 20 goblins fled screaming into the forest without Ren touching them. The shadowhounds were harder because they could sense through illusions. Ren used ice magic to freeze the ground beneath them and fire magic to drive them forward, hurting them away from the village and toward the mountain pass. The troll required actual force. Ren hit it with a concentrated beam of fire that he sustained for 12 seconds. The troll went down smoking and didn't get back up. The remaining goblins scattered when they saw the troll fall. That left whatever was inside the dungeon. Ren walked into the darkness, and his ancient senses mapped the structure instantly. 3 levels, spiral layout, unstable core at the bottom. And guarding the core, something that made even the Ash King's memories stir uncomfortably. A lesser void beast, a creature from between dimensions. Not powerful by demon lord standards, but absolutely devastating for anything mortal. It fed on mana and grew stronger by absorbing magical attacks, which meant Ren couldn't just blast it with raw power. The more magic he used, the stronger it would become. He needed a different approach. 1,200 years of tactical experience clicked into place. He didn't fight the void beast with magic. He fought it with the dungeon itself. Using earth magic on the walls instead of the creature, he collapsed sections of tunnel, funneling the beast toward the unstable core. Then he used force magic on the core itself, destabilizing it further. The core cracked and released a burst of raw ley line energy. The void beast, designed to absorb controlled magic, couldn't handle raw natural power. It shattered like glass hit by a frequency it couldn't process. Rin stabilized the core before it fully collapsed, sealing the dungeon permanently. He walked out covered in dust and monster blood, looking like a kid who'd had a bad camping trip. His mother scolded him for ruining his only good shirt. His father asked if he'd caught any fish. Rin said the fish weren't biting and went to wash up. Nobody in the village ever knew how close they'd come to being overrun, and that was exactly how Ren wanted it. The dungeon incident forced Ren to confront something he'd been avoiding. This village couldn't survive on hidden protection forever. He was one person, and even a reborn demon lord couldn't be everywhere at once. The village needed real defenses, trained fighters, proper infrastructure. The Ash King would have built an army. Ren decided to build a community instead. He started with the village's young people, 5 teenagers with nothing to do and too much energy. Ren offered to teach them self-defense, framing it as exercise and hunting preparation. He taught them basic combat stances adapted from techniques that had conquered kingdoms. Simplified, obviously, 12th century demon lord martial arts are not beginner-friendly. But the foundations were sound. Footwork, breathing, spatial awareness, reading an opponent's weight distribution. Within months, 5 farm kids moved like trained soldiers without knowing why. When a merchant caravan guard visited the village and watched them spar, he asked if there was a military academy nearby. Bram told him proudly that his son Ren organized the training. The guard looked at the 15-year-old, and then at the 5 teens moving in perfect formation, and decided the entire village was slightly terrifying in a way he couldn't explain. Ren also taught 3 girls with potential monosensitivity basic herbal medicine. Not magic. The village wasn't ready for that conversation. Practical medicine using the herbs from his garden and preparation techniques from another era. Within a year, Ashenvale had something no village its size should have had. Trained defenders and functional healthcare, all provided by a teenager who knew more about warfare and alchemy than most kingdoms, but presented it as hobby farming and exercise classes. The deception was absurd, but it worked because nobody expected a farm boy to be a demon lord. At 17, the outside world came to Ashenvale whether Ren wanted it to or not. A traveling adventurer guild posted a notice that monsters were increasing across the region. Dungeons were appearing at unprecedented rates. The same ley line disturbance that created the one Ren sealed was happening everywhere. Something deep underground was shifting, and it was pushing power to the surface. Ren knew what it was immediately. The ley line network was destabilizing because the seal the for heroes placed after his death was finally breaking down after 800 years. That seal hadn't just imprisoned the Ash King's power. It had been holding the ley line convergence in balance. When his soul reincarnated, drawing power from the convergence, it weakened the seal, and the seal was now failing, which meant the ley line network was about to go haywire. Dungeons would multiply, monster populations would explode, and eventually, the convergence itself would rupture, releasing enough raw mana to reshape the continent. The Ash King's final legacy, a ticking time bomb planted by his own reincarnation. Ren sat on the hillside behind the village and stared at the stars. The stars he'd once viewed from a throne of obsidian, planning which kingdoms to burn next. Now he viewed them from a patch of grass, wondering how to save the one place he cared about. The irony wasn't funny anymore. He couldn't fix the seal from here. The seal's anchor point was at the Spire of Dawn, 1,000 miles north. The same fortress where the For Heroes had killed him in his previous life. Going there meant leaving the village. Leaving the village meant trusting someone else to protect it. Trusting someone meant admitting he couldn't do everything alone. And admitting that meant accepting something the Ash King had never once considered. That other people mattered. Ren told his parents he wanted to travel and study. Elise cried but supported him. Bram pressed the wolf tooth into his son's hand and told him to come home. The 5 teenagers he'd trained swore to protect the village while he was gone. The 3 herbalist girls promised to keep the medicine garden alive. Elder Garen shook his hand with surprising strength for an old man. "Come back when you're done being young," he said. Ren walked down the road with a pack on his back and the wolf tooth in his pocket. 12 centuries of demon lord memories in a 17-year-old body, heading toward the place where he died to fix the mess his rebirth created. The journey north took 3 months. Ren traveled on foot because flying would attract too much attention. Along the way he encountered the world he'd once tried to conquer. Not from a throne looking down, but from the road looking forward. Cities he'd burned were now thriving markets. Fortresses he'd destroyed were now schools. Battlefields where thousands died were now farmland feeding millions. The world had healed from what he did. Not quickly, not easily, but completely. The scars were still there if you knew where to look. A valley that was too flat because he'd used force magic to level the hills. A river that ran unnaturally straight because he'd redirected it during a siege. A forest that was younger than the ones around it because the original had been incinerated. Ren walked through these scars and felt them in a way the Ash King never had. Because the Ash King never walked anywhere. He flew above it all, literally and figuratively. Ren walked through every consequence his previous self had left behind. And by the time he reached the northern border, he was a different person than the boy who left. Not because of some dramatic revelation or magical transformation. Because walking through the world you broke is its own kind of education. One that no throne can provide and no amount of power can replace. At the northern border, Ren found the Spire of Dawn. Or what was left of it. The fortress where the four heroes killed him was now a ruin. Walls collapsed, towers crumbled, the great hall opened to the sky. But deep underground, the seal still pulsed. Weakly, flickering, but alive. Ren descended through the ruins using shadow magic to navigate the collapsed passages, and found the sealed chamber exactly as the heroes had left it 800 years ago. For pedestals surrounding a central crystal, each one bearing a hero's emblem. The crystal was cracked, dark energy leaking from the fissures. The same dark energy that was causing dungeons to erupt across the continent. Ren examined the seal with the expertise of someone who understood both sides of it. The heroes had designed it to contain the Ash King's residual power after his death, but they tied it to the ley line convergence for stability. When Ren's soul drew power from the convergence during reincarnation, it cracked the link. The seal was failing because of him, and fixing it required something the heroes hadn't anticipated. The willingness of the sealed power's owner to give it back. Ren had to pour his own mana, his own recovered demon lord power, back into the seal. Not just some of it, all of it. Every drop of the Ash King's ancient power that had been slowly rebuilding for 17 years. Gone, permanently, feeding the seal to hold the ley line stable. He would walk out of this chamber as an ordinary boy. No magic, no ancient knowledge, no power beyond what a normal human could possess. Just Ren, son of Bram and Elise, from a farming village in the Greenreach Valley. 1,200 years of accumulated power, sacrificed to fix his own mess. The Ash King would have refused instantly. Power was everything. Power was identity. Power was the only thing that mattered. Ren thought about his mother's terrible singing. About his father's bleeding hands. About the wolf tooth in his pocket and the herb garden behind the house. About 5 teenagers who could fight because he taught them. About 3 girls who could heal because he showed them how. About a village that was safe because someone cared enough to make it safe. None of that required the Ash King's power. All of it required Ren. He placed his hands on the crystal and pushed. The power flowed out of him like a river breaking through a dam. 12 centuries of accumulated magic pouring into a seal designed to contain it. His body shook, his vision blurred, his knees buckled. The darkness behind his eyes was vast and terrible, the shadow of everything he used to be. Every battle, every conquest, every burned city, every destroyed kingdom. All of it compressed into the energy leaving his body. The weight of the Ash King's legacy, finally, permanently, being set down. When it was over, Ren collapsed on the chamber floor. The crystal was whole again, glowing steady blue, the ley lines humming with stability. The dungeon eruptions across the continent would stop within days. The monster populations would normalize within months. The crisis was over because the person who caused it chose to end it. Ren lay on the cold stone, breathing hard, feeling lighter than he had in either life. Not empty, lighter. Like a burden he'd been carrying for 1,200 years had finally been lifted. He tested for magic and found nothing. No fire, no ice, no shadow, no force. Just a 17-year-old boy lying on the floor of a ruin, completely ordinary, and somehow, impossibly, more at peace than the most powerful demon lord had ever been. The walk home took for months because Ren couldn't fly anymore. He was just a boy with a backpack now, walking at a normal pace, sleeping at normal inns. Getting rained on without being able to summon a wind barrier. Getting cold without being able to warm his own hands. Eating whatever he could afford, which wasn't much. It was, by every objective measure, the most uncomfortable for months of either life. And it was wonderful, because every discomfort was real. Every cold night, every bad meal, every sore foot was genuinely his. Not filtered through centuries of detachment. Not observed from a distance of infinite power. Felt, directly, the way ordinary people feel things every single day. The Ash King had never been cold in 1,200 years. Ren shivered under a blanket at a roadside inn and thought it was the greatest thing ever. Because being cold meant being alive. Really alive, not the hollow mockery of life that immortal power provided. When Ashenvale appeared on the horizon, Ren stopped walking and just looked at it. The stone walls he'd secretly reinforced. The fields he'd irrigated with hidden magic. The boundary stones carved with runes that no longer worked because his power was gone. But the village didn't need them anymore. The 5 teenagers he'd trained were now young adults who patrolled with real confidence. The 3 herbalist girls had expanded the medicine garden and were training others. Elder Garen had organized a proper militia using the combat techniques Ren had taught. The village had grown not because of magic, but because of knowledge. Knowledge that Ren had planted like seeds, and the village had grown on its own. He walked through the gate, and his mother tackled him with a hug before he finished saying hello. His father stood behind her, trying to look stern and failing completely. "Welcome home," Bram said, voice rough. Ren held up the wolf tooth, still in his pocket after 4 months of walking. "Never lost it," he said. And for the first time in 2 lives, Ren cried. Not the Ash King's tears, those had dried up centuries before his death. A boy's tears, for a home he'd almost lost and a family he'd never deserved. And for the quiet, overwhelming gratitude of being ordinary in a place that loved him. Life after the Ash King was simpler than Ren expected. Without magic, he was just a smart, well-trained young man with unusually good instincts. He took over the herb garden full-time, turning it into the village's primary medical resource. His knowledge of plants and remedies didn't require magic, just memory and care. He continued training the village defenders using techniques he still remembered perfectly. Combat skill lived in muscle memory and understanding, not mana. He helped his father in the fields, and discovered that farming was genuinely hard. Harder than conquering kingdoms, honestly, because soil doesn't surrender when you yell at it. Bram laughed when Ren said that and told him welcome to real life. Real life suited Ren better than either of his previous lives. The Ash King's life had been power without purpose. Baby Ren's life had been purpose without choice. This life, ordinary Ren's life, was both. Purpose he chose and work he earned. He chose to grow herbs, chose to train defenders, chose to farm alongside his father. Not because the world needed him to, but because the people around him were worth it. The Ash King never understood that. Power made the question irrelevant. When you can take anything, nothing is worth anything. Being ordinary made the question essential. When you can't take anything, everything matters. Every harvest mattered because it could fail. Every patient mattered because they could die. Every cold night mattered because warmth had to be earned. Every smile from his mother mattered because he finally understood what it cost to earn one. The demon lord who destroyed half the continent gave up all his power to save a farming village, and found, in the empty space where 12 centuries of magic used to be, something that power could never provide. A reason to wake up in the morning that didn't involve burning anything. Elise still sang terrible lullabies, now to the neighbor's new baby. Bram still came home with bleeding hands, but Ren now worked beside him. The herb garden grew larger every season, feeding remedies to 3 villages now. The combat training program had 20 students who came from neighboring towns. And the boundary stones, the ones whose runes no longer glowed with demon lord magic, were replaced with simple wooden signs that said "Welcome to Ashenvale." Because the village didn't need magical protection anymore. It had something better. People who cared enough to protect each other. Trained by a boy who once could level mountains and chose to plant gardens instead. Years passed the way years do in a village that works. Seasons turned, crops grew, children were born, old people told stories. Ren became the village healer, the combat instructor, the quiet young man with the gray eyes, who always seemed to know more than he should about everything, and who never, no matter how many times they asked, talked about where he went that year. Some people said he'd studied at a distant academy. Others said he'd served in a lord's army for a season. Elder Garen, who was old enough to trust his instincts over evidence, said Ren went somewhere to settle a debt and came back lighter for it. He was the closest to the truth. The Ash King's name faded from history books over the centuries. Children learned about the 4 heroes, but not the villain they defeated. The burned valleys healed, the redirected rivers found new courses. The world forgot Valgor the way it forgets all disasters, eventually and imperfectly. But in Ashenvale, a different legacy grew. Not one of destruction, one of quiet, persistent, ordinary goodness. Herb garden that healed. A training program that protected. A young man who came home when he could have gone anywhere, and chose, every single morning, to be useful instead of powerful. That's the legacy the Ash King never knew he was building. Not a throne or an army or a conquered continent. A village that worked, run by people he taught. Fed by gardens he planted, protected by defenders he trained, healed by medicine he grew, small, unglamorous, completely ordinary, and worth infinitely more than anything the demon lord ever conquered. Ren is 25 now, still living in the same house, still tending the same garden. His parents are aging slowly, the way farm people do, with grace and stubbornness. The village has grown to twice its original size because word spread about the good soil, and the good healer, and the good training, and the good people. Nobody says good demon lord, which is exactly right. Because the demon lord is gone. Not dead, not sealed, not imprisoned. Just gone, dissolved into the mana that holds the world together. What remains is Ren. A man with gray eyes, callous hands, and a wolf tooth he still carries in his pocket. Who knows more about warfare than any general alive and uses it to teach teenagers footwork? Who knows more about alchemy than any scholar and uses it to grow fever medicine? Who once could level mountains and now can't light a candle without a match, and wouldn't trade that for all the power in the world? Some nights, sitting on the hillside behind the village, Ren still looks at the stars. The same stars the Ash King watched from his obsidian throne. The same stars that watched him burn forest and freeze rivers. The same stars that watched a baby stare at a ceiling with ancient fury. Those stars see a different person now. Not smaller, not weaker, different. A man who chose to give up everything the world calls power, in exchange for everything the world calls ordinary, and found in the ordinary something the powerful never do. Contentment, not the hollow satisfaction of conquest. The warm, solid, real contentment of useful work done with your own hands. Hands that used to command armies and now need bread dough. That used to cast city-destroying spells and now plant herb seedlings. That used to grip a throne and now grip a hoe. Same hands, completely different purpose. And the purpose makes all the difference. The Ash King wanted to own the world. Ren wants to own a good harvest and a warm house. One of them ruled a continent and died miserable. The other tends a garden and sleeps soundly every night. The math speaks for itself. They tell stories about Ren in the neighboring villages now. Not epic stories, not legends, not tales of power and conquest. Simple stories. About a healer who walks 3 hours to treat a sick child and refuses payment. About a trainer whose students win every regional competition without arrogance. About a farmer's son who went away for a year and came back kinder than before. About gray eyes that see more than they should and hands that help without being asked. Stories that won't appear in any history book. Because history books record kings and wars and disasters. Not the people who grow the food that feeds the armies that fight the wars. Not the healers who fix the wounds that the wars create. Not the teachers who train the defenders who prevent the next war entirely. Those stories live in villages, told over dinner tables and around garden fences. Quiet stories about quiet people doing quiet work. The kind of work that actually keeps the world running. While the powerful fight over who gets to sit on which chair. Ren knows this because he's been on both sides. The chair and the garden. The throne and the hoe. And the hoe feeds more people. The Ash King destroyed half the continent in 1200 years. Ren has spent 25 years rebuilding one tiny corner of it. And that tiny corner is thriving. Fields green, children healthy, defenders trained, herbs growing. A village that works because someone decided it was worth working for. Not with world-shaking power. With calloused hands, an herb garden, and the daily choice to show up and be useful. That's the story of the Ash King's final conquest. Not a kingdom. A kitchen garden. Not an empire. A home. The demon lord who burned the world woke up as a baby in the ashes. He grew up, gave back the fire, and learned to use a hoe. And discovered that the hoe was mightier than the throne. Not because it was powerful, because it was useful. The stars watch Ren walk home from the hillside. Same walk as every evening, same path worn smooth by his own feet. Inside, his mother is humming that terrible lullaby to no one in particular. His father is cleaning dirt from under his nails at the kitchen table. Dinner smells like root stew and fresh bread and everything ordinary. Ren sits down, takes a bowl, and eats. No magic, no ancient knowledge, no secret power humming beneath his skin. Just a man eating dinner with his family after a day of work. And being, for the first time in 1225 years, completely, absolutely, perfectly happy. Not because he has everything, because he has enough. 12 centuries of conquering the world taught him nothing about contentment. 25 years of tending a garden taught him everything. The difference between the two is the entire story. The Ash King who wanted the whole world, and Ren who wanted one warm kitchen. The kitchen won. Elise sings. Bram eats. Ren smiles. The wolf tooth sits in his pocket, warm from his body heat. Outside, the village settles into evening. Lanterns glow in windows. The herb garden rustles in a soft breeze. Defenders patrol the perimeter with the easy confidence of well-trained young people. Children laugh somewhere down the street. And the soil, the same soil that has been burned and rebuilt 7 times, holds the village steady the way good soil always has. Patient, fertile, ready for whatever grows next. The Ash King was fire. Hot, consuming, impossible to contain, leaving nothing but ash. Ren is soil. Quiet, steady, holding everything up from underneath. Not dramatic, not legendary, not the kind of thing that makes it into history books. But without it, nothing grows. And that's the final lesson of this story. Fire gets the glory, but soil does the work. Kings get the monuments, but farmers feed the kingdom. Demon lords get the legends, but ordinary people keep the world turning. Rin chose to be soil after a lifetime of being fire, and found in that choice something 12 centuries of flames never provided. A reason to stay. Not power, not conquest, not the endless hunger for more. Just a kitchen with warm bread, a garden with healing herbs, a village with people who smile when they see him, and a wolf tooth in his pocket from the night his father called him good luck. That's enough. That's always been enough. He just needed 1200 years into lifetimes to figure it out. The village is quiet now. Stars bright, air cool, everything in its place. Ren washes the dinner dishes because it's his turn tonight. Elise dries them because she doesn't trust anyone else to do it properly. Bram is already asleep in his chair because farmers sleep when they can. A completely ordinary evening in a completely ordinary village, experienced by a man who was once anything but ordinary, and who would not trade this moment for all the power that ever existed. The demon lord burned the world. The boy rebuilt a corner of it. The man lives quietly in that corner, growing things, healing things, teaching things, being, finally, the kind of person who leaves a place better than he found it, instead of the kind who leaves nothing but ash. Valgor the Ash King died on a hero's blade 1200 years ago. Ren was born in a farming village with gray eyes and a mother who can't sing. They are the same soul, but they are not the same person, because the person is made by the choices, not the power. Valgor chose fire, Ren chose soil, and the soil, patient and quiet, grew something the fire never could. A home. The dishes are done. The kitchen is clean. Elise kisses Ren's forehead the way she is every night since he was a baby. 12 centuries of demon lord memories, and that kiss still makes his chest warm. Because some things don't need to be conquered. They just need to be received. Ren goes to his room, the same room he slept in since childhood. Small, wooden, with a window that faces the herb garden. He can smell the silver leaf and the bone set on the night air. Plants he grows, medicine he makes, people he heals. Simple math that adds up to a life worth living. He puts the wolf tooth on the bedside table, closes his eyes, and sleeps the way only someone with nothing left to prove can sleep. Deeply, peacefully, without dreams of burning. The demon lord who destroyed half the continent sleeps in a wooden bed in a farming village, with no magic, no power, no throne, no army. Just a wolf tooth and a mother's lullaby still echoing softly through the walls. And tomorrow he'll wake up, tend his garden, train his students, help his father. The same as yesterday. The same as every day since he chose this life over the one that chose him. The Ash King would call it pathetic. Ren calls it Tuesday. And Tuesday, lived well, in a warm house, surrounded by people who matter, is worth more than every kingdom that ever burned. Fire consumes. Soil sustains. The demon lord learned the difference, and chose the one that lasts. The morning light will hit the herb garden first, the way it always does. Then the fields, then the training yard, then the village square. And Ren will be there, the way he always is. Gray eyes open, calloused hands ready, wolf tooth in his pocket. Not a demon lord, not a conqueror, not even a mudge. Just Ren, the healer who grows herbs, the teacher who trains defenders, the son who came home, and the man who proved that the strongest thing you can do with power is give it up for something better. The kitchen is warm, the garden is growing, and the Ash King is finally at peace.